Welcome back to HQ Spotlight here on CBS Sports Network. With the college football regular season now over, we get our penultimate edition of the College Football Playoff Rankings released at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. Final rankings coming Sunday following championship weekend, with the playoff beginning Friday, December the 20th. And after what we saw this past weekend, there are a few nervous teams tonight. So let's welcome in bracketologist Jerry Palm and college football writer Dennis Dodd to maybe calm some nerves, maybe ramp things up a little bit. We'll see what the guys have to say. Jerry, you've been taking a crack at the rankings predictions these past few weeks. So how do you see things playing out in just a couple hours' time?
Yeah, well, the most interesting matchups, if you will, for where I want to see where the committee puts these teams is the cut line with Miami and Alabama. Miami with a better record, didn't play as good a schedule. This committee seems to respect or value, I guess, strength of schedule a little bit less than committees have in the past. But Miami showed up for every game. You know, Alabama was a no-show at Oklahoma. And I think that could end up actually being the difference between these two teams here. But there is a good case for either of those teams to be ahead. But this week really matters because teams that don't play Saturday don't usually change position relative to each other in the final rankings. In fact, it's only happened once, way back in 2014, the first year of CFP rankings. So where the teams that don't play Saturday or play this weekend line up is going to really be important, and that matchup will be the most important. And then Ohio State and Tennessee, another battle for a spot 8-9, I think, in the seeding ultimately. So that could be over home game in the first round playing each other, depending on how things sort themselves out this weekend.
Yeah, Jerry, you nailed it. I think it's even beyond Miami and Alabama. I think it's ACC versus SEC. If you followed social media this week, where Lane Kiffin put out a long, complicated tweet about why Ole Miss deserves to be in, that was followed by Brett Bielema at Illinois. We're not even talking about Illinois doing the same at 9-3. Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, doing a slickly produced tweet himself. I think it's a conference thing, and it's going to be beyond those teams, because I thought, Jerry, you brought up a great point. Where you see those teams that have finished the season, historically, that's where they're going to end up. So if Miami's in at number 11, where you have them right now, then they're going to be in no matter what. Alabama at number 12 or 13 is going to be out because they have no more games to play. And I think that's a question for Ward Manuel tonight, the chair. I don't know if he knows that. I don't know if the committee knows that. Will those teams stay where they are first? And then why should they move at all? Their seasons are done.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that all kind of plays out, especially with the fact that Miami also one that's not playing, and that bad loss to Syracuse when they had the 21-0 lead in that game last week. So we'll see how the committee does that. In terms of bubble teams, I mean, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina all fall into that category. So, Jerry, how are you judging those teams in terms of how you have them ranked?
In that order, actually, Alabama, Ole Miss. Alabama was ahead of Ole Miss this week, so there's really no reason there, nothing that happened this week that would really be a reason to change that. And then South Carolina, despite a win over Clemson, at Clemson, which is a really good win, you know, Ole Miss and Alabama are a ceiling for them because both of those teams beat the Gamecocks this year. So, you know, this is a committee, while they may not respect strength of schedule quite as much as committees in the past have. I'm not saying not at all. They obviously do. But head-to-head, they have really tried to stick with head-to-head when it made sense to do so, and this is a case where it makes sense. So I would be surprised to see South Carolina ahead of Ole Miss or Alabama, and in that case, you know, 13 is going to be a stretch for them.
Dennis, I'll put you on the spot here. If you had to put one of those teams in, which one for you gets the nod?
I have a problem with any of them right now.
Okay.
They've all got the flaws. Obviously, South Carolina's out because it's lost to the other two. I think those losses, as Jerry mentioned, by Alabama to Vandy and Oklahoma were unforgivable. And Ole Miss, I don't think, has a shot because of the Florida game. Look, I think there's a bigger picture here. I'm writing a story this week about how, you know, this conference affiliation doesn't leak down to the committee. And historically, and it's not this committee, they change every year, every 2 years. But historically, this selection committee going back to the BCS days has given Alabama every benefit of the doubt. Twice they've gotten to the championship level in the BCS in 11, I think in 17 when they won it, without so much as winning their division. Now you're going to reward them without finishing in the top 2 of a 16-team league with those 2 bad losses. Yes, I know they beat Georgia, but right now on paper and in reality, this is the worst Alabama team since 2010. If they win another game, they would tie the mark for that team, which to this day Nick Saban still disparages because they didn't come back and have the temerity to win a back-to-back national champions. So I think all 3 of them should be left out. I think the difference between a 2-loss Miami and a 3-loss SEC team is not as big as people think. It's not this canyon where they play this foreign brand of football in the ACC. And that, if you read the propaganda, is what we're being led to believe. I don't buy it. Miami's in.
Okay, getting to the conference title game is big for any program, but in terms of the playoff, 3 of the current top 4 seeds are playing in that game and could lose. So, Jerry, how do you see the committee judging these teams that lose in their title games?
Well, historically speaking, teams that are the lower-ranked team in a conference championship game that lose a game that is competitive, they don't get punished hardly at all. They usually hold their spot. They might move around a little as other teams that are playing move around, but they're very forgiving for a loss in that situation. Now, if the lower-ranked team gets blown out, that's different. If the higher-ranked team loses, that's very different because you might actually be switching the order of those 2 teams. So, in that case, those things are different. But if Georgia goes into, plays Texas and Texas beats them by a touchdown, I don't think you're going to see much of a change for Georgia at all.
Yeah, Big Ten, I think, is for seeding. I don't think there's any way around that. I think SEC is very interesting. What if Georgia loses, and what if they lose big? We were told by ESPN for quite a long time during that Georgia Tech broadcast last week that Georgia's clinched. If they win, they clinch. I've been around this too long to know that things can change even in these championship games. And one of Texas' boat races Georgia, and they have their 3rd loss. And we're already talking about these teams we've already talked about. Who deserves to get in? Probably the SEC runner-up. But again, you'd be comparing that team to a Miami with 2 losses, or perhaps even an SMU with 2 losses. Can you imagine if SMU with a loss in the ACC championship game gets left out? It's going to be fun.
Our bracketologist, Jerry Palm, college football writer Dennis Dodd, helping us get set for the college football playoff rankings unveiled tonight, the penultimate edition at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. They'll be reacting to the rankings over in the latest edition of the Cover 3 podcast. Chip Patterson, Danny Cannell, Tom Fornelli, Bud Elliott, always providing expert insight, opinion, and a few laughs along the way. Download and follow the Cover 3 wherever you get your podcasts or scan that QR code. You can get the latest episode right now.